The California sun, a relentless and unforgiving spotlight, baked the pristine asphalt of the exclusive Beverly Hills gated community. Here, wealth wasn't just displayed. It was weaponized into a sterile perfection. Manicured lawns, so green they seemed artificial, stretched towards colossal mansions that stood like silent, imposing monuments to unimaginable fortunes. Towering hedges and ornate iron gates served as elegant barriers, not just to the outside world, but between the neighbors themselves. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and chlorine, a fragrant mask for the profound isolation that permeated the quiet, sun-drenched streets. Every surface gleamed. Every corner was immaculate, creating a landscape that was both breathtakingly beautiful and emotionally desolate, a perfect cage gilded with gold and sunlight. It was a place where everything had a price, and genuine human connection was the most unaffordable luxury of all. Tiffany Davenport, the 28-year-old heiress to the Davenport tech empire, glided through this world in her custom-painted Bugatti, a machine of furious power reduced to a near-silent crawl by the community's strict speed limits. She was a portrait of curated indifference, her face a flawless canvas of expensive makeup, her blonde hair styled with a precision that defied the gentle breeze. Dressed in a Chanel ensemble that cost more than most cars, she clutched the steering wheel with manicured hands, her expression a mask of bored entitlement. Her life was a meticulously documented performance for her millions of social media followers, a whirlwind of high-fashion shopping, exclusive parties, and opulent vacations. Yet, behind the vacant blue eyes and the carefully constructed smirk, there was a hollowness, a deep-seated loneliness that all the money in the world couldn't fill. She was the princess in a high-tech castle, surrounded by everything and possessing nothing of value. Just ahead, a figure broke the illusion of perfect, uninhabited streets. Officer Frank Miller, a man who seemed to belong to a different, more grounded reality, was standing by a brand-new Mercedes G-Wagon. His 42 years were etched into the kind, weathered lines of his face, and his tired but observant eyes missed nothing. His police uniform, clean but visibly worn from years of service, was a stark symbol of duty in a world obsessed with luxury. He was meticulously inspecting the vehicle, his posture one of quiet, deliberate focus, completely absorbed in his task. To the residents, he was a function, a part of the expensive security they paid for, as much a part of the scenery as the imported palm trees. He was the invisible guardian of their gilded cages, a man of quiet dignity in a world of loud declarations of self-importance. Annoyed at having too slow her approach to her own driveway, Tiffany rolled down her Bugatti's window, the electric hum a soft intrusion into the quiet afternoon. A smirk played on her lips as she looked Officer Miller up and down, her gaze dripping with condescension. Taking a break from writing parking tickets to do some window shopping, officer, she called out, her voice laced with amusement. He turned, his calm expression unwavering. "Ma'am, something about this vehicle's VIN plate doesn't seem right," he began to explain, his tone professional. But Tiffany cut him off with a dismissive, airy laugh that echoed slightly in the quiet street. "Sure it does. Let me know when you solve the big case." Without waiting for a response, she hit the accelerator, the Bugatti's engine roaring to life as she turned into her driveway, leaving Officer Miller standing alone in her rearview mirror, the sting of her public humiliation hanging in the warm, still air. This story shows how a simple moment of arrogance can hide a much larger danger. The person we dismiss today might be the one who saves us tomorrow. If you believe in looking beyond appearances, subscribe to our channel and comment below telling us what city you're watching from so we can see how far this message of kindness travels. Officer Miller watched the Bugatti disappear, its engine a final, arrogant roar that seemed to mock the quiet dignity of the street. He didn't feel anger, but a familiar, weary resignation, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated instinct. The girl's words were meaningless, the casual cruelty of a life lived without consequence. What mattered was the feeling in his gut, a professional intuition honed over 20 years of seeing things that others overlook. He took a slow breath, letting the insult wash over him and recede, leaving only the problem in front of him, the gleaming black G-Wagon, and the tiny, almost invisible lie it was telling. He was not a man driven by ego, but by a deep, unwavering commitment to the truth, however small it might seem to the Tiffanys of the world. He pulled a small, worn, spiral-bound notebook and a pen from his breast pocket. His movements were economical and precise, a stark contrast to Tiffany's flamboyant gestures. He jotted down the license plate number, the exact time, and the Mercedes location. He then walked back to his patrol car, not to leave, but to retrieve a pair of standard-issue binoculars from the passenger seat. He found a discreet position down the street, partially obscured by a meticulously trimmed ficus tree, and focused the lenses on the dashboard of the suspect vehicle. Through the magnified view, the inconsistency he had noticed earlier became glaringly obvious. The digits on the VIN plate were not perfectly aligned, and one of the rivets seemed shinier than the other, as if it had been recently replaced. To an untrained eye, it was nothing. A minor manufacturing flaw, perhaps. But to Miller, it screamed forgery. He had attended a specialized training course on auto theft 5 years prior, a 3-day seminar in Fontana that most of his peers had dismissed as a waste of time. He remembered the instructor emphasizing these exact details, the slight difference in the depth of the stamping, the telltale sheen of non-factory adhesive visible only under magnification. The criminals were getting better, more sophisticated, but they always left a trace, a tiny signature of their deceit. And Frank Miller was a man who had built his entire career on noticing the signatures that others were too busy or too important to see. Meanwhile, inside her sprawling, marble-floored mansion, Tiffany had already forgotten the encounter. The officer was a fleeting annoyance, a momentary disruption in her perfectly curated existence. She dropped her car keys, a platinum fob encrusted with a single diamond, onto a glass table with a clatter that echoed in the cavernous silence of the foyer. Her home, designed by a world-renowned architect, felt more like a museum than a living space. It was cold, impersonal, and empty, a perfect reflection of her own internal landscape. She strolled through the echoing halls, her designer heels clicking on the polished stone, feeling not a sense of comfort or belonging, but the familiar, gnawing ache of profound loneliness. She pulled out her phone, her thumb immediately flicking to her social media feed. The screen lit up with notifications, thousands of likes on her latest post, a picture of her new Fendi handbag posed artfully on the seat of her Bugatti. She scrolled through the comments, a cascade of fawning praise and envious emojis from strangers. For a fleeting moment, the validation soothed the emptiness, a temporary balm on a chronic wound. Then, a notification from her social calendar popped up. The annual Starlight Charity Gala was in 2 days. Her mind instantly pivoted from the phantom connection of social media to the tangible, high-stakes performance of high society. The immediate and all-consuming question became, what would she wear? Back in his patrol car, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and cleaning solution, Officer Miller ran the license plate. The result came back almost instantly, registered to a 2023 Mercedes G-Wagon owned by a tech executive in San Jose. Perfectly legitimate. But San Jose was over 300 miles away. Then he ran the VIN he could read through the windshield. It too came back clean, registered to the same owner. For a moment, doubt crept in. Maybe the girl was right. Maybe he was just a bored cop seeing ghosts. But the feeling in his gut, that unwavering instinct, told him otherwise. A cloned car wouldn't just have a fake plate. It would have a fake VIN plate, one copied from an identical, legally registered vehicle somewhere else in the country. He picked up his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7L30. Can you connect me to Sergeant Henderson at the station? He asked, his voice calm and steady. A moment later, the gruff, impatient voice of his desk sergeant crackled through the speaker. Henderson. What is it, Frank? Don't tell me you found a lost cat. Miller explained the situation concisely. The out-of-place vehicle, the suspicious VIN plate, his gut feeling that it was a sophisticated clone used for surveillance. Henderson sighed, a sound heavy with bureaucratic fatigue. Frank, you've been watching too many movies. It's probably a rental, or the owner is visiting family. Don't waste your time chasing shadows in Beverly Hills. We've got real problems in the rest of the city. The dismissal stung more than Tiffany's casual insult. This was a dismissal from a fellow officer, a man who was supposed to trust his judgment. Miller gripped the radio, his knuckles turning white. "Sergeant, with all due respect, my instincts on this are strong. I think we need to at least put a watch on it," he insisted, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. Henderson's reply was curt and final. "Instincts don't justify overtime, Frank. Unless you have something concrete, I suggest you get back to your patrol route." Henderson out, the radio went silent, leaving Miller alone in his car, the weight of the dismissal settling heavily on his shoulders. He was on his own. That evening, Tiffany was at a ridiculously expensive restaurant, the kind where the plates were mostly empty and the prices were astronomical. She was with a group of friends, all of them cut from the same cloth of inherited wealth and studied indifference. They talked loudly, their conversation a vapid tapestry of gossip about other socialites, complaints about the service, and plans for extravagant trips to Dubai and St. Bart's. The world outside their bubble of privilege simply did not exist. They were insulated from reality by a fortress of money, and they saw no reason to ever look over its walls. Their laughter was brittle and loud, a sound designed to fill the empty spaces within them. As they sipped on $500 bottles of champagne, Tiffany recounted the story of her encounter with Officer Miller, embellishing it for comedic effect. "You should have seen him," she giggled, so serious, like he was solving the crime of the century over a little metal plate on a dashboard. Her friends howled with laughter. "Oh my God, Tiff, only you," said one of them, a woman named Chloe. "Imagine caring that much about a job like that." "It's so quaint," the table erupted in another wave of derisive laughter. In their world, sincerity was a weakness and dedication to duty was a punchline. Tiffany felt a surge of belonging, the shared mockery a temporary bond that held their fragile friendships together. Undeterred by his sergeant's rebuke, Officer Miller ended his shift and went straight home to his modest, two-bedroom apartment in a less glamorous part of the city. He didn't turn on the television or open a beer. Instead, he sat down at his small kitchen table with his personal laptop and began to research. He typed "luxury vehicle cloning rings Los Angeles" into the search bar. The results were chilling. He spent the next 3 hours reading detailed articles from law enforcement journals and news archives. The method was always the same. A high-end vehicle was stolen, given the identity of a legally owned car, and then used by sophisticated criminal crews to blend into wealthy neighborhoods for surveillance. He learned that these crews were patient and meticulous. They would spend weeks, sometimes months, casing a target. They learned the residents' schedules, mapped out security systems, and identified blind spots. They were professionals, and their operations were often multi-million-dollar affairs, culminating in violent, highly coordinated home invasion robberies. The articles were filled with statistics and case files, but Miller saw the human cost behind the numbers. He saw the terror of families held at gunpoint, the violation of their safest spaces. A cold dread settled in his stomach. This wasn't a shadow. It was a gathering storm, and it was heading straight for that quiet, sun-drenched street. He meticulously compiled his findings into a formal report. He included links to the articles, highlighted the specific methods that matched his observations, and reiterated his professional opinion that the G-Wagon was a Trojan horse. He knew that going over his sergeant's head was a risky move, one that could earn him a bad reputation or a lousy assignment for the next year. But the potential consequences of inaction were far worse. He thought of the dismissive young woman in the Bugatti. She was arrogant, condescending, and blind to the world around her, but she didn't deserve what could be coming. It was his job to protect her, whether she appreciated it or not. He attached the report to a carefully worded email and sent it directly to his commanding officer, Captain Ava Rostova. She was known as a tough but fair leader, a cop who had worked her way up from street patrol and still trusted the instincts of the officers under her command. Miller wrote with a clarity and conviction that was impossible to ignore. He ended the email with a simple, powerful sentence. "Captain, I have been a police officer for 22 years, and my gut tells me that if we ignore this, We are going to be reading about a tragedy in the newspaper very soon. He pressed send, the click of the mouse echoing in his quiet apartment. Back in her sterile mansion, Tiffany was trying on dresses for the gala. The room she used as a closet was larger than Miller's entire apartment, lined with glass-fronted cabinets, showcasing a breathtaking collection of haute couture. She stood in front of a three-way mirror, surrounded by a sea of silk, satin, and sequins, feeling a familiar sense of dissatisfaction. Nothing felt right. She wasn't just choosing a dress. She was choosing her armor for the social battlefield of the gala. It was a performance, and her costume had to be perfect. As she examined her reflection, she briefly saw past the designer clothes and the perfect makeup to the lonely young woman staring back at her. For a fleeting moment, she remembered a photograph on her bedside table. It was a rare picture from her childhood, showing her at about 7 years old, holding her father's hand. They were at a corporate event, both of them dressed formally, looking at the camera with stiff, practiced smiles. She couldn't remember the last time her father had held her hand, or even looked at her with genuine warmth. She had been raised by a succession of nannies and tutors, taught that emotional expression was a sign of weakness, and that the Davenport name was a shield that made her superior to others. Her arrogance was not innate. It was a carefully constructed defense mechanism, the only tool she had been given to navigate the world. She quickly pushed the unsettling thought away, the pang of sadness too uncomfortable to dwell on. She selected a dazzling, backless silver gown by a famous designer, the price of which could have paid Miller's salary for a year. The dress was a statement, a declaration of her status and power. As she admired her reflection, the brief moment of vulnerability was gone, replaced by the familiar mask of cool, untouchable confidence. She would be the star of the gala, the object of everyone's envy. And for a few hours, under the glittering chandeliers and the admiring gazes of others, she could pretend that was enough. 200 miles away, in a dimly lit office at the precinct, Captain Rostova was finishing her paperwork for the night. She was about to log off when Miller's email came through. The subject line, urgent, suspected surveillance vehicle in Beverly Hills patrol zone, caught her eye. She respected Miller. He was a quiet, dependable officer, not one for drama or exaggeration. If he was flagging something as urgent, it was worth her time. She opened the email and began to read. Her expression shifted from weary diligence to sharp, focused attention. She read every word of his report, clicking on the links and absorbing the chilling details of the cloning rings. Unlike Henderson, Captain Rostova understood that the most dangerous threats often began with the smallest inconsistencies. She trusted the instincts of a veteran officer, like Miller, over any bureaucratic protocol. She looked at the address he had provided for the parked G-Wagon and cross-referenced it with the high-profile residence on that block. The name Davenport flashed on her screen. She knew the name, of course. The multi-billion-dollar tech fortune, the high-profile heiress who was constantly in the tabloids. A perfect target, unimaginably wealthy, and according to most reports, living alone. Miller's hunch was starting to look like a certainty. She immediately picked up her phone and made a call to the head of the robbery homicide division, a man she had worked with for years. "Mark, it's Ava," she said, her voice low and serious. "I'm sending you a report from one of my best officers. I think we have a professional crew casing a major target in Beverly Hills, and I think they're planning to hit it soon." She forwarded Miller's email. Within the hour, a covert surveillance operation was authorized. Captain Rostova sent a brief, encrypted message back to Miller. Report received. "We're on it. Good work, officer." For Miller, those 6 words were more validating than a commendation. The next day, a discreet, unmarked van with tinted windows parked down the street from the G-Wagon. Inside, 2 plainclothes detectives began their surveillance, armed with high-powered cameras and listening devices. They quickly confirmed Miller's suspicions. Over the course of the day, they observed 2 men getting into the G-Wagon at separate times. The men did not look like they belonged in the neighborhood. They drove slowly, their eyes scanning the properties, taking pictures with a telephoto lens. They were professionals, their movements calm and calculated. The detectives ran the men's faces through a criminal database. Both had extensive records and known ties to an Eastern European organized crime syndicate specializing in high-value robberies. The detectives' surveillance soon revealed the terrifying scope of the criminals' plan. They weren't just randomly cruising. They were meticulously mapping the security infrastructure of the entire block. They took notes on the private security patrol's schedule, identified the locations of CCTV cameras, and used electronic devices to scan for alarm system frequencies. It was clear that they were planning a coordinated, multi-home heist. But their primary focus, the property they returned to again and again, was the sprawling Davenport mansion at the end of the cul-de-sac. Its size and relative isolation made it the crown jewel of their operation. Tiffany remained blissfully unaware of the danger circling her home. Her days leading up to the gala were a whirlwind of trivialities. She had a final dress fitting, a session with a celebrity hairstylist, and an appointment to select the perfect diamond necklace to go with her gown. She spent an entire afternoon debating between two pairs of nearly identical diamond earrings, a decision she treated with the gravity of a life or death choice. Her life was a bubble, carefully protected from any intrusion of real-world problems. The closest she came to acknowledging the men watching her house was complaining to her gardener that a creepy van was ruining the view down the street. The detectives, meanwhile, were piecing together the timeline. They learned about the upcoming Starlight Charity Gala, an event that would draw most of the community's wealthy residents away from their homes for the entire evening. It was the perfect window of opportunity. The criminals' chatter, picked up by a listening device, confirmed their plan. They would strike during the gala, hitting multiple homes simultaneously, with the main crew assigned to the Davenport mansion. They believed Tiffany's entire staff would be off for the night, leaving the house, and its rumored safe containing millions in jewelry, completely empty and vulnerable. Their intelligence was good, but they hadn't counted on the observant eye of a single patrol officer. The night of the gala arrived, a perfect, star-studded Los Angeles evening. Tiffany, looking radiant in her silver gown and dripping with diamonds, posed for the cameras on the red carpet. She felt powerful, admired, and in control, the undisputed queen of her superficial kingdom. She mingled with other celebrities and socialites, exchanging air kisses and insincere compliments, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding just a few miles away. As she was laughing at a joke told by a famous movie star, a heavily armed LAPD SWAT team was quietly taking up positions in the manicured gardens and shadowy alcoves surrounding her home. The plan was to catch them in the act. As the criminal crew, dressed in black and carrying bags filled with sophisticated disabling equipment, approached the Davenport estate under the cover of darkness, the police were waiting. Just as the first man attempted to disable the electronic gate, the signal was given. Bright floodlights suddenly illuminated the entire property, turning night into day. LAPD, drop your weapons. You are surrounded. A voice boomed through a megaphone. The would-be robbers were caught completely by surprise. The operation was swift, silent, and decisive. Within minutes, the entire crew was in custody, their multi-million-dollar heist foiled before it could even begin. The news broke the following morning. An emergency community-wide email alert was sent out to every resident of the gated community. It detailed the thwarted home invasion ring that had been targeting their neighborhood for weeks. It praised the swift and effective action of the Los Angeles Police Department, and it explicitly stated that the entire investigation had been initiated because of a single observation made by a community patrol officer who had noticed a minor discrepancy on a vehicle's VIN plate. The alert named him specifically, Officer Frank Miller. Tiffany woke up late, nursing a slight champagne headache from the gala. Her phone was buzzing incessantly on her nightstand, and she groaned with annoyance, assuming it was just more social media notifications. She finally reached for it, her eyes bleary as she opened the official community security alert. She skimmed the first few lines, her expression one of mild interest. Then she saw the name, Officer Frank Miller. Her blood ran cold. The words of the alert blurred together with her own taunting words from 2 days before. Let me know when you solve the big case. He had. He had solved the big case, and in doing so, he had saved her from a terrifying, violent ordeal. The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the floor as the full weight of her arrogance and his quiet heroism crashed down upon her. A week crawled by, each day a fresh wave of shame for Tiffany. The story of the foiled robbery was the only topic of conversation in the community, and Officer Miller's name was spoken with a reverence previously reserved for stock market titans and real estate moguls. An embossed invitation arrived at her mansion, announcing a special community appreciation event to formally honor him. Tiffany stared at the elegant card, her stomach twisting into a tight, painful knot. The thought of facing him, of standing in a crowd of people who now knew her home was the primary target, was mortifying. But the thought of hiding, of letting her cowardice win, felt even worse. This was not a choice between comfort and discomfort, but between her old self and the person she desperately hoped she could become. She arrived at the community clubhouse, a place she usually commanded with an air of effortless superiority. Today, she felt like an intruder. She had chosen her outfit with painstaking care, opting for a simple, conservative navy blue dress, a deliberate rejection of her usual flashy style. It was an act of penance, a visual signal that she was not the same person she had been a week ago. The air in the room was thick with a mixture of relief and lingering fear. Her neighbors, the same people she exchanged superficial pleasantries with, now looked at her with a new, unsettling curiosity. She felt their stares, heard the whispers that died down as she walked past, and for the first time in her life, she felt utterly and completely exposed. Her friend, Chloe, intercepted her by the catering table, a glass of champagne already in hand. "Tiff, thank God you're here. Can you believe all this fuss?" She whispered conspiratorially, gesturing toward the small stage being set up at the front of the room. "I mean, it's literally his job to, police things. Are they going to give the gardener an award for mowing the lawn next?" Chloe let out her signature brittle laugh, expecting Tiffany to join in. But the words, once amusing, now sounded grating and cruel. Tiffany just stared at her, the vacuousness of their shared world suddenly laid bare. "He saved us, Chloe," she said, her voice quiet but firm, before turning and walking away, leaving her friend with a look of stunned disbelief. The head of the neighborhood association, a man named Mr. Harrison, stepped up to the podium and tapped the microphone. After a few brief remarks, he introduced the guest of honor's commanding officer. "Please give a warm welcome to Captain Eva Rostova of the Los Angeles Police Department." Captain Rostova walked to the stage with an air of authority that instantly silenced the room. In her immaculate dress uniform, she was a commanding presence. She began by thanking the community for their support, her voice clear and steady. She didn't use platitudes. She used facts, calmly and methodically outlining the sophisticated nature of the criminal organization and the extreme danger they had posed. The room grew silent as the true gravity of the situation became clear. This crew was not opportunistic. They were professionals. Captain Rostova continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. They had blueprints, high-tech equipment, and a history of violence. Their plan was to execute a coordinated, multi-home invasion, timed for the night of the Starlight Gala. When they knew many of you would be away, a collective gasp rippled through the audience. She let the weight of that statement hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Their surveillance was extensive. They identified what they considered to be the most valuable and vulnerable target in this community, the one they planned to use their primary force on. Tiffany felt her breath catch in her throat, knowing what was coming next. That primary target, Captain Rostova announced, her voice leaving no room for ambiguity, was the Davenport residence. A murmur went through the crowd as dozens of heads turned to look at Tiffany. She felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck, her skin prickling under the weight of their collective gaze. The captain's words were not an accusation, but they felt like one. She detailed how the criminals had tracked Tiffany's predictable schedule, noting her frequent absences and lack of a visible security presence. In that moment, Tiffany saw her life for what it was, a shallow, self-absorbed performance that had made her the perfect victim, a fact now laid bare for her entire community to see. The only reason this catastrophe was averted, Captain Rostova declared, her voice rising with emphasis, is because one officer trusted his instincts over convenience and cynicism. He noticed something no one else did and refused to let it go. She paused, letting the tension build. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to recognize that officer today. Please join me in thanking Officer Frank Miller. The room erupted in thunderous applause. Officer Miller walked toward the stage, his shoulders slightly stooped as if trying to deflect the attention. He looked deeply uncomfortable in the spotlight, a simple man of duty caught in a world of spectacle. He accepted the commemorative plaque from Captain Rostova with a quiet nod and a mumbled, "Thank you." Mr. Harrison gestured towards the microphone, inviting him to say a few words. Miller hesitated for a moment, then leaned in, his weathered face projected onto the large screens on either side of the stage. He cleared his throat. "Thank you all," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "I was just doing my job, and that was it." He stepped back from the podium. The profound simplicity and genuine humility of his statement struck Tiffany with the force of a physical blow. In a world of endless self-promotion and empty speeches, his 7 words contained more character and integrity than she had ever known. After the ceremony, a crowd of grateful residents immediately swarmed Officer Miller, shaking his hand, patting his back, and sharing stories of how scared they had been. He accepted their gratitude with a patient, humble grace, but his eyes darted around, clearly looking for an escape from the suffocating praise. Tiffany watched from the edge of the room, her internal battle raging. Every instinct, every defense mechanism she had built over a lifetime of privilege, screamed at her to turn and flee. But a new, quieter voice, one she barely recognized, urged her to stay. It was the voice of her conscience, finally awakened. She took a single, shaky breath, then another, and began to move. Pushing through the remnants of the crowd, she walked with a purpose she hadn't felt before. Her destination was not a boutique or a party, but a confrontation with her own shameful behavior. Each step was a small victory over a lifetime of pride. She saw him standing near the exit, finally free of the crowd, making his way toward the parking lot. He was just a man trying to go home after a long day. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and resolve. She knew this was a defining moment. She could let it pass and remain the person she was, or she could seize it and begin to become someone new. He was standing next to his patrol car, parked discreetly at the far end of the lot, away from the glittering luxury vehicles. He seemed to be savoring the moment of quiet when he heard her footsteps on the asphalt. He turned, and his expression was not angry, not triumphant, but simply neutral, waiting. The setting sun cast a long shadow behind him. Tiffany stopped a few feet away, her hands trembling by her sides. The carefully rehearsed apologies she had practiced in her head evaporated, leaving only the raw and filtered truth. She had to force the first words out. "Officer Miller," she began, her voice cracking slightly with emotion. "My whole life," she continued, looking him directly in the eye, "I've been taught to see people as price tags. I've been conditioned to measure everyone's worth by their wealth, their status, their brand." The confession tumbled out of her, raw and unpolished. "I looked at you and I saw a uniform, not a man who was protecting my home, my life." While I laughed in his face, a single tear traced a path through her makeup, and she didn't bother to wipe it away. This was not a performance. It was a surrender. "What you did was heroic, but what I did was shameful. I was so busy valuing things that I forgot how to value people." She took another shaky breath, feeling the weight of years of arrogance finally lifting from her shoulders. "You've shown me what real value is," she said, her voice barely a whisper now. "It's duty. It's integrity. It's looking out for others, even when they don't deserve it. You showed me what real value is, and I was completely blind to it." She stood there, stripped of her pride, her condescension, her entire carefully constructed persona, waiting for his judgment. She expected anger, or at least a cold satisfaction. She was prepared for him to tell her that her apology was too little too late. Officer Miller looked at her for a long moment, his tired eyes holding not a hint of triumph, but a deep, simple understanding. He saw not the heiress, not the rude woman from the other day, but a person struggling to find her way. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "We all have blind spots, ma'am," he said, his voice gentle. "The important thing is being willing to see past them." His words were a balm, a simple act of grace that she felt in her very soul. He offered a forgiveness she knew she had not earned, and it was the most valuable gift she had ever received. He then extended his calloused hand. It was a simple gesture, an offer to close the vast chasm that had separated their two worlds. Tiffany stared at his hand for a heartbeat, then reached out and took it. His grip was firm, steady, and warm. As their hands met, the last remnants of the emotional wall she had lived behind for 28 years finally crumbled into dust. It was not just a handshake. It was a pact, a promise, a profound human connection that was more real and more valuable than anything her money could ever buy. In that quiet corner of the parking lot, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tiffany Davenport was not reborn, but she had finally begun to awaken. The tears now flowed freely, tears not of shame, but of a profound and overwhelming relief. She was no longer just the Davenport heiress, a hollow brand name. She was a person who had made a terrible mistake and was now, for the very first time, taking the first, terrifying, and exhilarating step toward making it right. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she was walking in the right direction. The drive back to her mansion was different. For the first time, Tiffany was acutely aware of the silence, but it was no longer the oppressive echo of loneliness. It was a space of quiet contemplation, a blank canvas on which she could finally begin to paint a new life. The handshake with Officer Miller had not magically erased her past, but it had opened a door to a future she never knew was possible. She walked through her marble foyer, not as its bored, entitled owner, but as a custodian of immense resources that had, until now, been utterly wasted. That night, she didn't turn on the television or scroll through her phone. She sat in the quiet dark, letting the magnitude of her transformation settle in, feeling not shame, but a nascent, unfamiliar sense of purpose. The next morning, she acted with a decisiveness that stunned her family's team of lawyers and financial advisors. She convened an emergency meeting, not in a lavish boardroom, but at her own kitchen table. She didn't ask for opinions or suggestions. She gave clear, unwavering instructions. "We are establishing a new charitable foundation," she announced, her voice steady and firm. "It will be endowed with $50 million from my personal trust fund." Before they could even process the number, she gave them its name, a name she had settled on during her sleepless night. "We're calling it the Miller Grant." The name was a permanent tribute to the man who had shown her the meaning of true value. The foundation's mission was not vague or grandiose. It was specific, practical, and born directly from her experience. Its sole purpose was to fund advanced, specialized training and provide state-of-the-art equipment for community patrol officers across the entire Los Angeles area. She learned that the auto theft seminar Miller had found so valuable was an optional, underfunded program. The Miller Grant would change that, ensuring that every officer had access to the kind of training that turned a good cop into a great one. She was determined to create an army of Frank Millers, guardians whose greatest weapons were their sharp eyes and well-honed instincts. Her next call was to a high-end automotive broker. The conversation was brief. "I want to sell the Bugatti," she said. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. The broker, accustomed to her whims, asked if she was making room for a new, even more exclusive model. "No," Tiffany replied, a small smile on her lips. "It just doesn't fit my new life." The car, once the ultimate symbol of her detachment and status, was now just an asset. The entire multi-million-dollar sum from its sale was wired directly to the foundation as its initial operating budget, transforming a monument to her ego into the seed of a lasting legacy. True change, she realized, was not just about writing checks. It was about showing up. The following week, she attended the monthly meeting for the Neighborhood Watch program, held in the same clubhouse where she had faced her public shaming. When she walked in, dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, a palpable silence fell over the room. She ignored the stares, took a seat in the back row, and opened a notepad. She listened intently as Officer Miller, leading the meeting, gave a practical briefing on residential security. She took notes, asked thoughtful questions, and at the end of the meeting, she humbly signed her name to the volunteer patrol roster. A new, unlikely partnership began to form. On her scheduled nights, she would walk the quiet, pristine streets of her neighborhood alongside Miller. He taught her what to look for: the unfamiliar car, the slightly ajar window, the subtle signs that something was amiss. In return, she used her formidable influence and resources to navigate the city's bureaucracy, cutting through red tape to ensure the Foundation's grants were implemented effectively. They rarely spoke of that day in the parking lot, but it was an unspoken bond between them, a quiet, respectful friendship built not on shared backgrounds, but on a shared commitment to making a tangible difference. Tiffany's life became unrecognizable from its previous iteration. Her social media accounts, once a curated gallery of luxury goods and exotic locations, were transformed. She now posted about the Foundation's successes, highlighted the stories of officers who had used their new training to prevent crimes, and celebrated the quiet heroism of civil servants. Her old, superficial friends fell away, unable to comprehend her newfound passion for what they mockingly called her charity project, but for every fair-weather friend she lost, she gained a dozen new, meaningful connections with volunteers, community leaders, and the very officers her foundation supported. She was no longer just an heiress. She was a leader. 2 years passed. The scene is a vibrant community block party, not in the sterile confines of the gated community, but in a public park that served as a bridge between Beverly Hills and a neighboring, less affluent community. The event, with its free food, live music, and activities for children, was the flagship annual event funded by the Miller Grant. Tiffany, dressed in a simple T-shirt bearing the Foundation's logo, laughed as she flipped burgers on a massive grill. Standing beside her, sharing the duty, was Sergeant Frank Miller, his recent promotion a direct result of the citywide recognition his actions had inspired. A young, bright-eyed rookie officer approached them, his uniform still stiff and new. He stood before Sergeant Miller with a look of genuine reverence. "Sir," the rookie said, his voice filled with earnest respect, "I just wanted to say thank you. Reading your story in the academy. It's the reason I'm here. It's why I wanted to become a police officer." Sergeant Miller, a man still uncomfortable with praise, was visibly moved. He placed a firm, supportive hand on the young man's shoulder, his expression a mixture of pride and humility. Tiffany overheard the entire exchange, and she paused, the spatula hovering over the grill. She caught Sergeant Miller's eye across the plumes of smoke and the joyful noise of the crowd. They shared a look, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of the journey they had taken together. It was a look that spoke of a legacy, a cycle of inspiration that had grown from one man's integrity and one woman's courage to change. Her life was no longer defined by the things she possessed, but by the purpose she had found. In that shared glance, the story's enduring truth was clear. A person's real worth is not measured by their bank account or their social status, but by their character, their humility, and the positive impact they leave on the world. What is the true value of a person? Is it what they have or what they give? Leave a little heart if you believe love and humility are more powerful than any wealth. Subscribe for more stories about second chances. Comment love is priceless if you also believe in the power of human kindness.